Hello! This is a behind the scenes video on how I made panel hopping. Just jumping right into it, we're going to start with the composited version because this is a lot simpler to explain. Um, I added all the sound effects and music in the last stage. Uh, so all of these little bits are different sound bites. I had a lot of older songs I've made that I just was able to repurpose. So this part I did literally like a few hours before uploading. Now the filter on this is pretty subtle, but there's a chromatic aberration on everything, which is basically the red, green, and blue channels are all offset. To achieve this, I used the curve modifier and then manually brought down green and blue for this and then left red at normal, and then it's just the different channels for the rest of these. And then they're on a black background and they're set to screen mode. And then there is also a Gaussian blur, which isn't, it's pretty toned down, but basically it makes the entire thing look like it's filtered. Um, yeah, and then this this strip right here is because I had a rendering issue that I needed to fix, so I'll go ahead and hide it for a moment. Yeah, so I had to re-render the scene, but yeah, that's basically how I achieved the filter for this. Now let's check out the actual file. The way that faces work is they are actually grease pencil, which is basically allowing you to draw on the scene, and it's layered really weird. Um, but this is basically the most efficient way to add faces. If I wanted to change it to grr, this is on the wrong layer, but so it's very simple to just add a completely new expression, and most of the time it does its job. But there are a couple instances, like you can see here, it's offset a little bit, but it's, yeah, this one. I don't know why, but sometimes it just decides to put everything super far apart, and it looks perfectly fine to the camera. But I have to make sure the camera doesn't ever rotate. This was like one of the last steps just because it's so camera specific. Right here, pretty much hidden. I just did this because it's something I wanted to practice. But yeah, that mouth is fully open. And you can see from the side, this is not drawn with grease pencil. This is the only expression where it's like actually changing the model to a different model. Oh, hang on, let me... There's a shape key I can move up and down that deforms the entire face. But basically, for this one, I just grabbed all of the vertices that I wanted to be hidden for this part and just moved them out of the way. So it looks really bad from any angle except the camera's point of view. Now, next thing. The hair looks pretty good in most of the shots. I think I messed up in one or two. Uh, but it is actually like rotating around the model. And there are points where I have to offset it manually so it doesn't clip into the wall or anything. Um, but yeah, it's just like being spun around just so it looks... It's like the face where it has to match the camera, so it's one of the last things that gets done. The rig is pretty simple. IK bones, or inverse kinematics, which basically make it so the bone calculates how much it should bend to achieve the end point. The feet are detached, so I try to hide that. And the hands look like a ball most of the time, but I can actually show you how I do this. There is a ball hand model that gets shrunk down and a flat hand model. But here, the fingers are one bone because they don't need to do too much. But yeah, it's just like one bone being moved around and rotated. So it looks more normal there. More, not... There's a lot of cheating going on to make it look natural. But it is very much, I didn't want to rig an entire hand. There's a hood control. These can be moved. I don't think I moved them too much. Sunglasses also move. I also didn't move them too much. But yeah. And then this guy, his nickname is Hugh Dude, but that's the name that my character gives him right before this scene takes place. So it's not his real name. He's incognito. He's evil. This is just the triangle being rotated and moved around. So you can get so much out of just moving the triangle around the face. It's really fun to just experiment with the poses and faces. There we go. Hands are the same as before. The important distinction between this and the other one is this UV warp modifier. So basically these are being moved across a color grid by this modifier that creates the change in color. Ooh, shader. I could break down the shader. Yeah. I'm not going to go too much into detail on this, but basically there is a light half of the sheet and then there's a shadowed half of the sheet. And both of them like have their own shading too. But then it goes to this, which determines what's like really light and really dark. And then instead of letting it be black, it goes through a bunch of mixing to basically create a little sponge effect on the edges. You can see it moving as I zoom in and out. And then that mixes the light and dark version of the material. This is not rendering. Why is it not rendering? Because this crashes. I'm gonna scream. Alright, Blender did crash and I had to reload everything. Basically, you can see the same sponge effect is kind of coming into play on the shading. I think, yeah. It looks really cool on when it's like in this gray area. But the shine is done really badly, basically. Okay, it generates a Voronoi texture and then stretches it out a ton. Basically, if I took out this, Voronoi is just like a mosaic pattern. This makes it into lines, and that goes through a similar color ramp, which does the light and dark mixing that I showed off for the other shader. So it doesn't look good at certain angles, but generally it feels like cartoony stylized glass. Or gold, or metal. Just it's very versatile. This animation has drop shadows, and they're very subtle. They take up a lot of processing power, so I only put them in the final version. Blender has a built-in feature to draw outlines around objects. Let me see if I can offset it. And they look like complete nonsense, except from the camera. So I think it's just ray casting, if you know what that is. If you don't, imagine the computer's drawing lines to everything in the scene. So it's very faint, so most people probably will never notice it, but it's there, and I think it adds to the overall charm and look of the piece. If you ever watch old cartoons, they actually draw the cells, they draw on like transparent paper, and then they overlay that on the background. There's a very small drop shadow from the characters onto the painted backgrounds. Set is it's a really long hallway. As I move through the animation, you might notice a couple things. Oh, yep. We'll get to that in a moment. There, yeah, this one. For the wide shot, I wanted to pull the camera back. You can see it with these black bars here. So that meant making another shape key to extend the entire room just so the camera could go back far enough. This hallway is separate, and it also has a slanted shape key, which makes it feel like it's moving faster than it is. So this is the hallway where this happens, and also this happens, because I didn't need to make two hallways. This shot is done practically, as in these are actual real hallways that coexist in the same space. They're just really distorted to work. And from the camera's perspective, they just look like different comic panels. Probably don't do this, but basically I started with how I wanted the end result to look. And you can see I had to like force everything to the edge and then cut it to prevent anything from actually popping through the frame like here. So this is an incomplete hallway at the very end. You can see right here, this originally popped into this hallway. So I manually cut this part all down and then added black borders above and below it. And once I knew how this part would look, I went to the starting position, and these all actually slide into place, and you can see that same black border is what gives the illusion that it's or just empty space, but it's actually got like a hole it's sliding into. And then it's extended, and then it jumps down to the final one for when Alex jumps through. This is kind of the same thing that happens for the other flashback. Yeah. So the reason this whole thing rotates is because I wanted... Oh. I basically animated this and I'm like, okay, how do I get the rest of this? But this is This is just a smaller version of the scene with everything shrunk down. There's a lot more shape key trickery. This part moves backwards and forwards based on if Alex is supposed to be reaching across the panel or not. And this, yeah. Also, I don't know if this is clear, but this is how I get the controller off the table into my hands for this scene. So basically, this happens. I grab it off the table, and then that happens off screen, and then that's how it's gotten here. And you can see I didn't do the same like flashback or the same split panel, but I am grabbing the controller again here. Same effect here as before. Oh. Yeah, lots of weird expressions. Now is also a good time to talk about these borders because they mostly just serve to keep the video in a smaller aspect ratio. I think it's 3:4 or 4:3. But there's also a couple instances where characters will go in front of this because I'm actually moving the border farther back. Here's another example of the camera frame being pulled back so the character's in front of it. And it's manually adjusted for like every scene pretty much. Let's see. Yeah. So here enters and then it pops back into place after there's no longer a character in the foreground. These are all just separate models. There's nothing too special about them. They've just got a star pattern overlaid on top of a flat color. And they're basically just holding that one pose and then they jump along the track. Let's see. Smear frames are basically just 3D models, just like hot dogs and ellipses. They just get moved into position. The legs are just being shrunk up into the torso here, but you can still see them. They're just being moved up and down basically every frame. This, instead of zooming the camera in, he actually just gets closer to the camera. Yay! Oh boy, this was quite the process. Mostly because I completely changed what I was doing as I was working on it. Yep. You can see the original storyboard here. The flashback was actually going to be shown in real time, but I changed my mind. But most of the camera angles changed. This part, Dude was going to learn how to do the same technique, and I realized that is a very, very stupid decision with a character who has no moral compass, so I could not justify letting him learn an ability that would basically let him grab anyone at any time. So he is relatively weak and stupid for now. I changed my plan for this a lot. There was a fight scene at the end of it that I cut. Let's see. Ooh. Now we get to look at my least favorite thing, live action videos of me. Also Blender's least favorite thing, because they eat up a ton of CPU for no reason. Ignore the Mona Lisa in the background. Um, but I actually acted out these scenes in my room.
No, don't do that. It's unethical. Remember, right? I don't sleep anymore. But I got the data I needed. Give me that. How did you do that? You gave it to me and then forgot. Yeah.
That's me right there. That's me practicing how to grab things.
Alright, I'm not gonna bother trying to get this out of you. I index all your abilities, so I'll just search through them. Why would you index the comics? They're jokes. I didn't. They're not real. Some kind of speed enhancement. Not useful when you're tied up against the wall. Some kind of dash slash. Ooh, I like the design. I'm taking that. And here
What
we
that one is.
go. You found a way to jump through relevant events. Interesting. You know, normally when people read the comics, they don't get them. They're like, I don't get this. This isn't funny. And I like the design. I'm taking
Oh, you know what?
that.
This one's offset. But this is the this is
comics.
people
They're
they
jokes.
normally
I
read
didn't.
the comics.
They're not real. Some kind of speed enhancement. Not useful when you're tied up against the wall. You know, normally when people read the comics, they don't get them. They're like, I don't get this. This isn't funny.
And then it cuts off. But that's what he's saying. I'm sure of it. I thought I would have more to say about the animation itself, but I guess it's fairly standard practice. It's just I'll put in a few clips of like early footage.
They were all like, no, don't do that. It's unethical. And they were right. I don't sleep anymore. But I got the data I needed. Give me that. They're not real. Some kind of speed enhancement. They were all like, no, don't do that. It's unethical. And they were right. I don't sleep anymore. But I got the data I needed. Give me that. How did you do that? You gave it to me and then forgot. Yeah. Alright, I'm not gonna bother trying to get this out of you. I index all your abilities, so I'll just search through them. Why would you index the comics? They're jokes. I didn't. They're not real. Some kind of speed enhancement. Not useful when you're tied up against the wall. Some kind of dash slash. Ooh, I like the design. I'm taking that. And here we go. You found a way to jump through relevant events. Interesting. You know, normally when people read the comics, they don't get them. They're like, I don't get this. This isn't funny. But you somehow got like actual meaningful data out of that, and that's just really annoying. Can I have something to eat? No, you're just going to try and escape or. Oh. They were all like, no, don't do that. It's unethical. And they were right. I don't sleep anymore. But I got the data I needed. Give me that. How did you do that? You gave it to me and then forgot. Yeah. Alright, I'm not gonna bother trying to get this out of you. I index all your abilities, so I'll just search through them. Why would you index the comics? They're jokes. I didn't. They're not real. Some kind of speed enhancement. Not useful when you're tied up against the wall. Some kind of dash slash. Ooh, I like the design. I'm taking that. And here we go. You found a way to jump through relevant events. Interesting. You know, normally when people read the comics, they don't get them. They're like, I don't get this. This isn't funny. But you somehow got like actual meaningful data out of that, and that's just really annoying. Can I have something to eat? No, you're just gonna try and escape. Oh.
But it's basically just like planning out what you want to do through the storyboards I showed, and then also the acting it out in real life, and that helps you get a sense of how things move. Another goal with this was to have a lot more subtle movements, which mostly just boiled down to me making the most of the inverse chromatics and just tilting like the chest and torso. Because moving this changes like every other bone, and it feels like it's creating a lot more subtle movements when it's just me fiddling with stuff. But I'm very happy with how this animation turned out overall. Letters and numbers, I forgot about those.
Oh, I can't believe he escaped.
These are a reference to the fact that the universe this takes place in is basically like a big video game. It's not like everyone's trapped in a video game. It's just like the world was created and it functions like a video game. So it's not like the Matrix. They just can respawn health points and magic points, and they can level up. And so that's where all of these abilities come from. This is just an ability that this character has, and they can actually see each other's like exact health. This is probably visible in universe most of the time. I love this pose. I will now go through some of the other projects that didn't quite make it this far. Alright, this one was originally my big project, and then I changed my mind as I was working on it, because I couldn't get anything to feel right, you'll see.
Hey, Jet Beam, aren't those barbecue blocks evil? Look at those guys. They are probably the ones who put the barbecue blocks in. Look at how full of malice they are.
Oh, yeah.
I don't hate this animation, but it just felt very messy to me. I want to get rid of this keyframe. There we go. No. Like if you're already like holding the pole backwards, there's not a good way to convey that action. This one I did sound effects first. I also just very fast paced because of the original.
Hey, Jet Beam, aren't those barbecue blocks evil?
Just the immediate jitter. This is when I was still animating at 24 FPS with interpolation. What I do now is basically I only do the key pose, and I don't let the computer ease in. You can see here there's only 2 keyframes, but the bone moves on its own. So the way I did it in the new animation is there's no easing. Everything's like manually done with a few very rare exceptions. I kind of like the set for this. It's nice colors, and I worked on a bunch of stuff, basically. It never really got to the level that I was hoping for, and it felt better to start fresh with a more concrete set of pre-planning. This was my original test of how comic panels would work, and like the weird aspect ratio.
Love you.
Why can he talk? Oh, I don't have Morgan's voice here. This is just me talking. Huh? Oh, Teaching him how to hold stuff, enable the capacity for adaptation. So instead of letting him learn any swear words, I'm teaching him nice words, so he creeps people out less. I didn't have reference video for this. It probably shows. Because all the poses are very strange.
It's not working.
There is storyboards. My goal was to recreate or to create comic feeling, and it just really doesn't work at this point. I hadn't figured everything else, or I hadn't really figured everything out. But yes, I did not. Panel hopping was not an overnight accident or success. It was 4 months of trial and error and a bunch of other failed animations before that. So, yeah. I hope this helps, and thank you for watching.